All right, so we're recording. So this is the seventh episode. That's an awesome picture. Seventh episode of I think Karen named this the Takedown, which is a nice, cool name. And this one's a cool one. I've been probably excited for every single one of them for different reasons. But Scotty's our first for Coach Marino, Coach Bellis, and myself. Our first state qualifier, our first real superstar pretty much. So, I mean, we'll turn it to Scotty right away. I'm kind of curious of this because I actually don't know the answer of it. And just to kind of get us flowing here, do you remember how you started wrestling or what got you into it?
Yeah, well, the Bellis, he told me that I didn't have to wear a singlet and I'd get an A in his class.
Wait, what
He
grade?
told everybody that.
What grade was that?
That was 7th grade I started.
Okay. It was good when you were at the middle school, coach.
Yeah, I want to go back.
Coach,
Hey, Nick. Tell him to stop. Sorry.
Coach, it's all right. Do you remember when you first met Scotty?
I don't know. I mean, he might have been like a 5th or 6th grader. Really, what year were you at Seven Bridges?
5th through 8th.
Yeah, I know, but what years was that? You graduated in 13.
Oh, I don't know.
So it would have to be.
So you would have been there. You would have had 5th or 6th grade with me.
Yeah.
That school opened in 2003.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know what year that was, but I remember building the bridge.
You'd have been there 2006 and on.
Yep.
6 through 9.
So that's crazy though.
They had some modified team. Those guys. They were something.
Oh, we're gonna get into all that, but think about the gap, the bridging the gap there, right? I graduated high school in 05, and you started recruiting Scotty in 06. Like that's how quick kind of it. Like if you were there maybe 3 years earlier, you would have been my coach too, which would have been great. Unfortunate, but Coach Marino, do you remember when you first met Scotty?
I do. I was, coaching the modified at that time, and there was a good group, and they not only seemed like good wrestlers, but they seemed very confident, and you knew there was something between those guys there. Like they were, they were having a good time. They were rolling around on the mats. They were getting after it. They would goof around some, but they were respectful in a way in which they, wanted to wrestle, wanted to get out there. And, you can see, oh, your picture just fell on you. You can tell that there was some special wrestlers there. And Scott was the leader of that pack for sure.
Scotty, do you remember, and I'll talk about how I first met you because it's a little later in the game, but do you remember like your first experiences with wrestling when you met Coach Marino, Coach Sabellis, and maybe not met Coach Sabellis because he was in school with you, when you met him as a coach and not just a teacher?
Well, my 7th grade year, Marino wasn't the coach. We had the guy.
Oh, Mo Baby.
Movahil. I have no idea what his first name is. And he knew absolutely nothing about wrestling, but he was a good guy. All we did in practice was push-ups and pull-ups. That's it.
Was he the big guy?
No. He was a high school teacher there. I don't know.
I don't know him. But then when you started really getting into it, you met Marino and DeBellis was starting to coach you. Do you remember how that was?
Not really. That was so long ago. Like, I mean, I remember meeting Marino and everything, but 8th grade, I don't have, too many like standout memories of. No. But high school, like every year, I have like a standout, like.
Well, we'll get into high school. I just wanted to add in the fact too that, and Coach Sabellis has said this, and Marino said in his interview how good Scotty was as a young guy, as a middle schooler, just naturally, just a stud. My dad knew who Scotty was before I knew who Scotty was, because I was in college when Scotty was starting to get good, and Scotty ended up joining Empire, or at the time Iowa Style, and. My dad's like, yeah, he actually mentioned you, Coach Bellis. I vaguely remember this conversation, but he's like, they got a good young coach over there that seems excited. And John told me there's a Greeley guy that's tough that joined the club. And I'm in school. I don't know about any of this. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I vaguely remember a couple times coming back for a camp maybe coach was running and rolling with Scotty a little bit when he was young. He might have been like, summer of 9th grade or beginning of 10th grade or something along those lines. Or maybe he was at the club, but I met him a little bit before the year I started coaching him. I remember that. Do you remember making the commitment that you wanted to be like what made you – I'm actually curious about this too. What made you want to be committed to wrestling? Because at that time, before you answer this question, not to blab here, but at that time, Coach Sabellis was just becoming a head coach, right? So he didn't really know the connection with Iowa style and clubs, and he was starting to get into it, but it wasn't like a thing, right? I wasn't in the room yet pushing it, right? Along with Coach Sabellis now. So it's kind of like you just did that on your own. So what made you decide to do that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really like doing anything I'm not good at. So, in this day and age, like, I mean, if you're extremely talented, you could get away with, not wrestling at a club. But I mean, you can't compete if you don't, wrestle for a club.
You see that picture, Tortora?
Yeah, I saw it. About 3 seconds
that
later. I
picture?
don't like that picture.
That was like
was
a
like this,
Peter
I went
point.
like this.
Oh, that was a Fairport kid.
Yeah, Scotty was better than that kid too. But
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
But all right. So high school. Right, your transition as a freshman. I don't know really much about your freshman wrestling season. Coach Marino and Coach Sabellis could probably speak on this, and I'm sure they will. But I'm curious at your take of how did high school here you are. Here's high school wrestling. How was that?
I mean, it was definitely a lot different than middle school. But, I think I held my own all right my freshman year, with the exception of a couple matches. But
I think you were the best kid on the team other than probably Lefkowitz. I think maybe Lefkowitz won the counties that year.
Yeah, it was pretty much me and Lefko that year.
I honestly think that Lefkowitz did a beautiful job that year and stepped it up because he had you as a freshman that was doing the work.
Coach Marino, do you remember him when he was in I know you had him in modified, but when he made that jump, do you remember it a little bit?
Now, I remember, I'll tell you a short story about modified. I mentioned it, I believe, in the Bing Bing one, where, we meet as we're doing matchups by emails. You go there, you briefly meet the guy, you try to get the other coaches on board. You gotta label your guys like 1, 2, or 3, passive, aggressive, experience level, novice, beginner, experience. And I forget what school it was. And this guy was kind of like just being what I thought was a little smug. And he was like, we're talking about Scott's match. And he was like, Coach, I just want to warn you, this kid's pretty good. And I was like, yeah, I think my guy's a potential state champion. And Scott went out there and tuned him up. And after the match, the coach comes up to me and was like, oh, you were right, something like that. And he was so confident about his kid. And I watched him wrestle in the room, and I'm like, yeah, this kid's got it. This kid right here has got it. And like you said, he was our first hammer. And he made it to the States. And, he was our career wins leader for a period of time until it was just recently broken. But he was the man. And his freshman year, he made the jump nicely. He went into a man's weight class. The lightweights are usually run by middle schoolers and ninth graders. He was like 150, 140. And I remember, I think it was Rye.
150.
I tried to make 145 once. It didn't happen.
Okay. We were wrestling Rye in a beginning of the year sort of tournament. I think it was one of the first couple matches. And there was this kid, he was probably a junior, maybe even a senior.
Yeah, he won sectionals
was like
that year.
Charlie or something, right?
Yeah, he won sectionals that year.
Yeah. And, Scott held his own. Did you beat the kid that day?
No.
But it was a good match. And from what I remember, here's this kid, you're 14 years old. You're a freshman. You're wrestling a 17, 18-year-old possibly. There's a big difference at that age. And that's when you knew, okay, this kid's going to be fine. He was thrown out there to the wolves. And he held his own and had a lot of wins, a lot of pins.
Yeah. A lot of kids freshman year is tough.
Yeah. Especially in
there's a big
mid to upper weight class.
Yeah.
Especially that
13-year-old and a 17-year-old, big difference.
I didn't line up the intro like I did for Izzy yesterday for Scotty, but like Coach Marino said, for the people listening, people know Izzy, right? That are listening, probably more of our current parents and stuff like that, and they have an idea of who Scotty is. But Scotty was our win leader. Scotty was a 2-time section finalist, and a state qualifier, all-state wrestler. And to think about how he did that, right, with a new coaching staff, pretty much, right? We were together for the first time and we were meshing together there, and there was nobody before him, right? Like if you look at, I mean, it's kind of comparable maybe back when I was in high school, because there was this kid, Dan Kinn, who took like second in the section in 2001 or 2000 or something like that from Greeley. And then I placed third my sophomore year, and that was the first guy to place since then, right? And then Greg kind of came and Bert kind of came and whatever. And then with you, 2012 you placed. You were the only one I think on the team. And then actually Russo took sixth. And then 2013 was the year one of our best seasons ever, and that was on your back. But that was with Kirby placing, Mitchell Klein placing, Brett Lobian placing. Who else was there? There's another guy that placed too. I can't think off the top of my head. We had 5 all-section guys that year. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, so, you look at Jacob and a Matt and those guys and Aaron who had great careers, but they at least got to see your groundwork. They saw what you did first. Do you remember, like, your thought process as being like, you knew Greeley wrestling was getting better. Like, you knew it. You felt like we were getting better.
Saw it through the years.
You saw it through the years.
My freshman year and senior year.
Did you feel like a pressure maybe of, like, I'm the guy and I need to hold this thing together? Because right after you was Brock. Right after Brock was Joe Sasso. Right after Joe Sasso was Jacob Aaron. There's been lines of good kids after you, but you started it. Do you remember, I don't know, pressure or feeling? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know yeah, pressure, like you want to do good but nothing like, I have to do this because nobody's done it since, blah.
I mean, the other thing is when I started and Scott was there, it wasn't like, even if Scott won his matches and he won most of them, that didn't mean the team was going to win. And we knew that. And I remember talking to him and being like, hey, concentrate on your matches, do what you can do. And you can't worry about the team score. Because I think then we were forfeiting 4 or 5 matches each match.
We had some my freshman year, we had some bad team scores. When we wrestled John Jay Cross River, it was like 84 to like 6.
Right.
And who got the 6?
I think I won, and I think Lefko won.
No, you were the only one that won that match. Remember, I threw my clipboard and put a hole in his mat?
Is that something?
Yeah, because the whole match we're getting pinned. Scotty's got his guy in the back. This guy is pinned. And, he's not getting the call. They go out of bounds. He calls him out of bounds, something like that. I got so many. Those are the days when we had clipboards. I used to break 2 or 3 a week.
Those are the days you had clipboard. You still use a clipboard.
That's true. I'm a technology teacher. I got to keep it up.
That's it.
Go ahead,
Coach. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Coach.
That's the way it was. I mean, we were starting matches off technically 24 to 36 to nothing at the time. And we knew that going in. And, we're looking for, moral victories like, hey, get it to this score or whatever and win more matches than them. Actual physical matches that we wrestled, win more than them. Because, you're starting off in that hole. It's tough. And to their credit, they stuck with it.
Ironically, when first time I wrestled John Jay Cross River, I was coaching at Cornwall. And they were just starting. It was their first year.
When I was in high school.
And Cornwall went down there and shut them out.
We pounded them too back then.
Yep.
They started.
And 2 years later, they had a superstar team.
2 years later, yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting, too, when you think about it, because pretty much 2 years later for us, maybe 3 years. When Sky was a freshman, forfeits. By the time he was a senior, we were 5th in the section or whatever we were with 5 all-section guys, and we could have done better. We did well, but we could have done better. There was a snowstorm. If you guys recall, Billy Marino and Bing Bing could not wrestle back because of the snow, and I think both of them would have placed. That's a lot of points we got. Mitchell lost a real BS semifinals match on a class point that he could have easily won. And Scotty could have won, and we know that. And we'll get into that a little bit too. Scotty wrestled a great career, and it was tough. But I told DeBellis yesterday, I rewatched that match like yesterday, and I'm still not happy about it. So I'm still trying to work my way past it. But I want to touch on before we get really into your junior and senior year when you really started crushing it. Everybody has that stigma about Chappaqua, right, and Greeley, and that we're not tough, right? We're not tough. We're a bunch of spoiled kids, blah, 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 and that's the stigma. And it's not true, I don't think, for everybody at least, because I came from Chappaqua. I like to think I was tough. Greg Ironfrank and Scotty and Brock and Jacob and Aaron and Matt, guys that were scrapping. Izzy, right?
Nikki lives in Chappaqua.
Nikki's a real tough guy. But the thing with Scotty is people were scared of him, right? Scotty was tough. And almost to the bing bing factor where it was like a couple of times we had to be like, Scotty, tone it down a little bit. But people feared him, right? And for somebody to fear Scotty coming out of Chappaqua, it's a whole another look of an athlete. And I don't know, maybe what made you be so physical and so rough out there? Was there something, was that just how you wrestled, or was there a thought like, I'm going to give it to this kid because X, Y, and Z? Like, was there a thought process there?
I think that's just, how I wrestled. Like, I mean, me and Brock, in practice, we just go at it, Like, I watched, some of the other good guys that just came out of Greeley, and, like, they had, like, a totally different wrestling style than, like, me and Brock. Like, me and Brock were just, like, lead with your head and,
Yeah, oh, my God.
Well, that's why I think Jacob was so good, because Jacob has a mix. Jacob's a mix. Aaron's a tough son of a gun, but just he's very calculated. He's a scrambler, but he's tough. He'll hold onto your foot until his arms fall off, but he's not physical like that. Jacob, pretty friggin' physical and pretty good at wrestling, so it was a good perfect storm. But but that's what I talked about. I think in Matt's, it might have been Matt's or Aaron's interview. I think we all three of us and four of us with Danny when he was there too. Gave Scotty all we had. But, when I was coaching Jacob, Aaron, and Matt, I was, 5, 6, 7 more years, more coaching experience, right? Like, it's different. And for Scotty to be able to do what he did with such a young staff and a new staff together and a program that was in the dumps when Coach DeBellis took it over and then he made it better, it makes it that much more impressive, I feel like, what he did. And I still think he left some on the table, and as did I, as did you, and as did everybody else. I still think he could have done better, but he still had an unbelievable career considering the circumstances. You guys agree with that?
Beat Berkowitz in the quarterfinals his sophomore year.
I had the closest match to him in sectionals that year. Everybody was like, you can't lose to him. And then I ended up having the closest match.
Yeah, no, I thought you could have beat him.
I wasn't there that day.
And he was a state finalist.
Yeah.
That was my first year coaching, I believe.
Yeah. Well, you weren't at that tournament because
I was at my grandma's funeral. Yeah, so I was at my grandma's funeral, and how close I was to my grandma. God rest her soul. But if that happened now during sectionals, I would be like being my first, and I would be crushed because either way, But being so close to the kids, it was my first year, and I was still crushed. Right, I was still crushed, but I had to do it. And then I remember calling DeBellis like 15 times to try to see what was going on with Scotty and. All of that. So then, let's fast forward a little bit into your junior year. And you really came on the scene, I think, Oswego. Did you win Oswego your junior year?
Yeah.
So I think that's when it really started to be like, this kid he's going for it. Talk a little bit about that.
Right, with the front headlock?
Well, we'll talk about that front. I mean, that thing.
Was that Rhode Island?
That was Rhode Island with the 3-quarter Nelson. DeBellis is like, you're never going to beat anybody with that. And then I was like the Rhode Island state champ with it.
He was a Connecticut state champion.
Whatever.
I used to tell Aaron Walk the same thing about the cradle. You're not going to be able to cradle everybody, Aaron. You got to work on something else.
And meanwhile, he literally cradled everyone.
State finals, 59 seconds. Hey, listen, I'll eat that hat any day of the week.
I'm with you. But do you remember the change, Scotty? Like maybe from sophomore year to – because I was there with you sophomore year too. We all were pushing you pretty good there. You were the guy. And then – the next year, you made a substantial jump.
I mean, I don't know, to be honest. It's just like, you put in all the time. And, I also think, getting older and being in the, heavier weight classes made a big difference too. Like, being young, like you were talking about before, wrestling, 18-year-olds. Now you're like, 17 and 18. You're like the big guys. And there is a big difference between a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old wrestler,
sure. I mean, I think – go ahead, Coach.
I thought that you were always very good to the guys that were coming up. Like I never thought that you really hammered the – like if you knew you could beat the guy, you would start and then, you would never really brutalize anybody unless they were as tough as you, and then you had –
good. Our guys are notoriously good in that I feel like. Scotty was good at that. Brock was a really physical guy, but I can't really remember times where he would bully a guy on the mat in a real match. And, Jacob Ferrer too, another physical monster. And I'll never forget with him, there was a Portchester match with Jacob that I was like, dude, take it easy. And he goes, I know, obviously. And he went out there and took it easy. And Scotty was the same way. He wasn't going to pick on somebody, it's like that saying, pick on somebody your own size. Like He's ready to go. But with Brock, to go back on them two, and I think he kind of had a little bit to do with Brock. I'll never forget. There was one practice where Brock was getting a little extra chippy with Scotty, and Scotty literally took him outside the gym, like shot him outside the gym, outside the back door, and they were in the
snow.
That was a different time. That era. That era was a different time because Bing Bing was like that. You know, the room was.
I think that's something to do with me too, though. Like I was fresh out of college. You know, I might not have been as seasoned as I am now. I still love, but we're kind of missing a little bit of that now too. So I think we need to find that happy medium where it's like Jacob kind of, where it's like, and Matt and Izzy and Aaron, you know, even though Izzy, Matt, and Aaron weren't like physical wrestlers, they're tough. You know, they're tough. Not to say that our guys aren't tough now, but maybe that confidence to be as physical and as gritty as a guy like Scotty was is important, you know.
It was fun to watch.
So, Scotty, favorite, and we're going to go, I have other things I want to talk about in your career that are in my head, but what was your favorite moment as a wrestler in Greeley?
Favorite moment?
I'm curious.
Favorite moment? I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of good moments, you know, and a lot of moments I'll remember forever. But favorite moment, I don't know. Going to the state tournament was probably one of them because I was the first one to do it in such a long time. That, you know, and you know, the wins leader for a while. That was, you know, that was a first for a while too. But favorite moment, I don't know. Those are up there with my favorite moment, but there are a lot more unforgettable moments in my career.
I don't know where you're going to go with that, so I'm kind of scared to ask what that even means. You know, like I don't know if I should follow that up.
No, but like things that I'll never forget, like getting my head bashed open, you giving me stitches like 3 days before the state tournament.
That's awesome. Thank you.
The quarterfinals in the state tournament with Levi Ashley in like quadruple overtime or whatever.
That was a battle. Oh my God.
No, and then he ended up taking second that year.
Yeah. You had the draw to get there, you know, but you lost a couple. You were there. I mean, that's what people might not understand either. Like you took 7th in the state that year, but like from 1 to 7, I feel like anybody on a good day could have won that tournament. It wasn't like you were out of Ben. And you look at these guys like Scotty decided to go, you know, to the workforce and he's crushing it, doing his thing. But Ben Honus was a 2-time NCAA All-American and he's still training and he's still wrestling on like the world level. So that's a guy Scotty. I always get them confused because they kind of look alike and they both are good. But that's a guy that he was battling with. Do you know what I mean? Like, so he was right there with some superstars. So if we had 4 years as a group together with him, who knows how his senior year would have been? You know, that's something to think about. But I remember, so Coach DeBellis and Coach Marino will probably back me up on this. So I still, to this day, well, maybe not to this day, scrap in the room with the guys, right? And this year we were younger and Izzy, you know, crushing it. The year before we had Aaron Walk. I had to wrestle with him all the time, right? And then the year before that we had Jacob. Before that we had Brock and, you know, the guys like Nadler or whatever. I think Scotty is the first high school guy to take me down, right? And he would hold it against me like it was the worst. The whole room would like have to hear about it. But he's the first guy that made me feel like maybe I'm getting older, but not even that. Like some of these high school kids are good. You know what I mean? Like Scotty was the first guy that I had to like, you know, when I was in college, I would go back and wrestle with the guys. It was whatever, but they weren't that good. I wasn't wrestling a Scotty level guy, right? I don't think it was more my age. I think it was more the fact that Scotty got tough and I had to like really step it up. I couldn't just like play around with him. Like if I stayed on a shot and he got in a front headlock, I might have been going to sleep. I had to wrestle, you know, because he had that really crazy assassin. Do you remember like the scraps and getting your scores on me or anybody else, a coach or anything of that?
I definitely remember some of our scraps for sure. I remember one where we went for like a half an hour, and I'm pretty sure I gave you a concussion during that one.
Oh, well,
remember when your head was hurt?
That was a go because somebody in this chat wasn't being very nice to younger kids, so we're going at it a little bit. But yes, you didn't. I don't think you did give me a concussion because the go was over, right? And I don't know if you two know this story. The go was over. Scotty had left or whatever, And I'm sitting with John Deagle, right? I'm sitting with him, and that's when he still did like elite practice, then 7 o'clock practice, right? So Scotty was in the elite practice and he left, and I was running the 7 o'clock practice. So I'm sitting next to John, and all of a sudden, like my left eye, I just see blurry. Like I don't see like anything right. And I'm like, John, I didn't really have a headache though. I was just seeing blurry. I'm like, John, I'm seeing blurry on my left eye. He goes, you have a concussion. You should go to the hospital. So I had a concussion. Thank you, Scotty. Thanks for that. But yeah, we used to go at it. I remember, I think DeBellis got the W though. DeBellis came out of retirement.
Oh, that's because he cheated.
No way. DeBellis would never.
100%.
Win if you lose. Oh no. It's win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat.
All I know is, was I roughing that match?
I don't know, but DeBellis had a big clasp going on.
What?
Big.
I don't remember. I really don't remember. I remember it being like a real fun thing though.
Being old and squirrely.
But see, that's what the fun thing is. And Coach Mir, I'll let you jump in on this too. That's like the fun thing that people don't realize about, I think, our program, where, I'm serious as hell, but I'll joke with the kids. Coach Abellis is probably the other way, where he'll joke with the kids, but get serious with them when he needs to. And Marino's the same way. And I think, us all together with Scotty there, we had some good times. Like, I remember that match. I'm pretty sure me and Marino both were gassing it up, making a big thing out of it. Everybody was laughing. Everybody was having fun. And, yeah, they really wrestled. It was probably a good goal for Scotty to get that match in. But everybody was having fun with it, right? Like, it was for DeBellis to say, hey, I'm getting out there. Let's wrestle a match. It was cool, and that shows, like, I don't know, the type of bonds and relationships we have. It's fun. We have a good time.
With Scotty was very special. Scotty was a very special, like, he was almost part of the coaching staff.
He was the first one. He was the first one to be like, because Jacob Ferrer and Aaron and Matt were part of the coaching staff.
Yeah.
They would sit next to me during the match when we would be coaching and be right there with us. But Sky's the first guy to kind of get over that threshold where he was like a wrestler, but he was kind of part of the staff with us at the same time. Coach, do you remember any of those little Marino, those things?
I do. And I mean, mostly I would say it's because Scott needed more competition in the room. I think people did not want to wrestle Scott. It was not a task that was enjoyable because the kid's a bull. I mean, simply put, the kid is a bull out there, and he's always go, go, go. And you guys know this. Scott knows this. I love him to death. But there were times in the match where I'd be like, Scott, take it easy on the edge. There is wrestling hard, wrestling a little bit too hard. And, we don't want to get hit for a point. We don't want you to get hit for a point. We don't want you to get tossed, and some of it. And
I never got tossed.
I was just going to ask that. Did you ever get a penalty point?
Yes.
Penalty point, yeah. Tossed, no.
He's got a point before, definitely.
I remember my dad and Tatora's dad almost got tossed.
Listen, we could talk about that. We guys should talk about
number one.
Because I was a young guy. I wasn't a teacher or anything. I was just this 23-year-old volunteer assistant. So there was no obligations of me being a good citizen at that time. So Scotty was wrestling and he was stalling. The other kid was stalling really, really, really bad. Do you remember this, DeBellis?
Yeah, it was that Matt won.
Oh my God.
I wasn't in the corner. I was not in the corner though.
Just me?
It was you because I was on another mat.
Marino. But the kid was stalling.
I looked across the mat and I just saw all this commotion.
But when somebody's wrestling, even if they're stalling, I knew Scotty was going to win. I wasn't panicked, right? But I guess my dad in the stands was yelling, "He's stalling! He's stalling! He's stalling!" And the East Ramapo fan base did not appreciate that, I guess. So all I see is like these guys like circle my dad, like yelling at my dad. And I'm 23 years old. I'm like, that's not going to happen. So Scotty, the match finishes, and I go up there. And I was civil for people that were watching. I'm a very level-headed person. I went up there to just have a nice, calm discussion with the East Ramapo fan base. And then my dad told me that he has this and pushed me away. And that's kind of.
Scotty's dad was there too.
Scotty's dad was there too. Scotty's dad was like cool and collective as well. He was.
Yeah,
okay.
but he was ready.
Oh, of course, but he was cool and collective. There's somebody was getting a little ruffled there.
Scotty's matches always brought out these melees. Almost. I mean, like there was always something going on.
Scotty, I don't know if you know this, but me and the Beacon coach still don't get along to this day because of you. So thank you for that as well. He won't make eye contact.
Well, Scott, I have to say, Scott was our first showstopper.
Yes.
Nobody went to the concession stand. Nobody went to the bathroom. Not when Scott wrestled. When Scott wrestled, no matter if we were there for a tournament, and I think if their freaking kids were watching, they stopped watching their kids match and they watched Matt 1, 2, or 3 or whatever he was on, because something was going to happen.
Yep.
And he was always looking. He was always looking to pin someone. And who doesn't love 6? I mean, hey. He did.
Not only showstopper too. He was our first guy where, last year when Aaron was wrestling at sectionals, I tapped coach and it was like the quarterfinals match. I knew he was gonna, dominate. He pinned everybody through the whole tournament, right? And I looked at coach. I'm like, it's really nice to have somebody when you could just sit back and that they're gonna go out there and take somebody out, right? And Scotty was our first guy. Same thing, like a dual meet, right? We might lose 2 in a row, but here comes Scotty. And we're like, all right, we're good. We got this one. I could sit back. I could breathe. Here goes a nice pin. You know what I mean? Like he was the first guy to be that guy. And we had some tough guys on that team to go back on the point where some people didn't want to wrestle him up. And, Brent Lobian got really good. I think if he was a little bit more open to wrestling you more, he would have been maybe a state champ. That kid had talent. And he was tough. He wasn't a guy like Scotty where he was wrestling his, 7. Well, maybe he was, but he wasn't committed to off season. It wasn't his predominant sport. Football was. But yeah, that happened often where Brent wasn't scared, but he was like, nah, I'd rather wrestle with Billy today. Because he knew what Scotty was going to bring. He knew what Scotty was going to bring. And Billy was tough too. But Scotty was, he was the enforcer kind. It's like, when you go with Scotty, you're going to feel it a little bit. It's not going to be just like you're not going to have that guy where you talk and laugh and you kind of go through the motions. No, you're wrestling. And that's what's happening.
The only one who ever liked to wrestle me was Brock. He loved it. He couldn't get
was
enough.
a perfect partner for you.
He still texts me to this day. Do you want to go?
We're going to interview him too.
I think we're actually going to get him on Monday. I texted him. I was like, we'll get you next week. But funny story too, Scott. I don't know if you remember. You probably do remember this because you're a pain in the neck. But I was speaking of Brock. It was leading up to I don't know if it was leading up to sectionals or we were having practice for Scotty for states. And I don't remember what part of the season it was. But Brock asked me to drill. Brock got a lot better at wrestling, but when he was a sophomore, he was just tough. Like he placed in sectionals on just being a tough, strong kid, Brock. His skill set that year was not there. And we were drilling, and I don't know how, but he like twisted my ankle so bad. He rolled over it. I don't know what he did. And it blew up. And I think Coach Marino, I think that's when Mrs. Marino, Rachel first became trainer around that time. And I remember going, and I never would go to the trainer if I had to. Like it was the size of like a watermelon. I'm like, Rachel, I think there's something wrong with my ankle. Like it was like this big. And I'll never forget because even though Brock got a lot better and he was strong and he was tough, he wasn't senior year Brock yet, right? So he really could, he would stay tough with Scotty, but he really couldn't compete yet. Like Scotty would still tune him up. And I knew I had to wrestle with Scotty to get him ready for sectionals or states or whatever it was. So I asked Rachel every practice to tape me up. So I would tape up my ankle, whatever, every practice. Every single time I would wrestle with Scotty, every time, if I was on a shot, whatever, this son of a gun would reach over, grab my ankle, and try to rip it off. And I would always be saying, this son of a gun, he has to do this. But he was a fighter, man. He knew where my weak spot was. It's like a lion with a wounded gazelle. He's like, he saw me out there like limping, and he's like, I'm going to finish this guy now. You remember that, Scotty?
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, I'm glad you remember that. Me too. My ankle still clicks at night.
My knee still clicks at night.
Well, still, wait until you're 33.
My remote still clicks at night.
Nice add on there. One funny story too. I don't know if Coach Marino remembers this. I'm pretty sure you were with me there. DeBells will definitely remember this. Scotty was, and I kind of respect Rogers for this, to be honest with you. But Scotty,
yes.
Scotty was so tough with that assassin. He actually got it with me once too, and I made him let me up, and I made believe it didn't happen.
I did pin you with it, just so everybody knows. I did. He tapped out.
Never. I tapped out. Stop it. Stop that right now.
Stop. That's tapping out.
I might have said stop, and then you stopped. I didn't tap. If you kept going, I would have went out before I tapped. Anyway.
Was that the quarterfinals of sectionals?
Yeah, when the kid tapped out.
No, it was divisional.
No, that was sectional.
Sleepy Hollow. Yes, you're right. It was Sleepy Hollow. And that kid was
Sleepy Hollow.
No, it was Clarkstown South where the kid
Clarkstown South kid, but it was at Sleepy Hollow.
That's Sleepy.
And that kid ended up wrestling Brock in the semifinals like the next year.
And beat him too. Brock beat him.
I barely beat him though in overtime.
Are we talking about the same kid?
Huh? Yes. You put him in assassin.
That was at Pace.
No. That was at Sleepy.
Remember, that was a one-day tournament because of the snowstorm. It was just that pace that year.
That was your junior year. You tapped the kid out.
No, it was my senior year, quarterfinals.
Either way, he tapped the kid out with the Carstown South kid, and the kid had him in the assassin. The kid starts tapping, right? The ref stops it for like potentially dangerous or whatever. He stops it for the match is not over. Brandon Rogers gets on the mat and forfeits because that kid taps, and he says, "We don't tap in wrestling," and forfeits, and Scotty goes on to the semifinals.
Yeah.
That was crazy. You remember that?
I
I
remember.
do remember that. I
Um,
was happy that it was over. You know.
I mean, let's talk about that tournament a little bit too, like your stitches, right? Like, I mean, not the one.
That was the year before.
Which year was the one? Not the one I did it when we were. I think we were just drilling too.
Yeah, we were.
So
Your
it
elbow.
was just an awkward position, but
No, that was the division semifinals of my junior year with the kid from North Rockland.
Illegal headbutt.
You went to overtime with them, and if we're gonna be honest, you weren't wrestling your best. You should never have went to overtime with that kid.
Well, I pinned him the next week.
Well, dude, let me get to the story here. So that kid blatantly headbutts you, and it's a point. It's overtime. The match is over, right? That's when the Beacon coach got involved because there was a Beacon kid in the finals, and he didn't want that match. We ended up winning the argument anyways. You go on, wrestle the Beacon kid, but you have stitches. It doesn't help, all that stuff.
I didn't wrestle the Beacon kid.
You didn't wrestle because you had to go put the stitches. Yeah. So the next week with a wrap on your head, just running through guys and getting revenge on that North Rockland kid. Do you remember how that felt? Was that pretty cool?
Yeah, well, I remember my first match in sectionals my junior year. I was wrestling some kid from John Jay Cross River, and he headbutted me again, and my stitches blew right open again. And then I remember pinning the kid, but that wasn't one of my more fond memories of the tournament. My semifinal match, DeBellis had my head wrapped up in some crazy contraption, and I got a point taken away because it was an illegal head wrap.
Yeah. Greg Tavares was the ref. And we already asked the other ref, hey, is he okay? Is he okay? He's fine. He's fine. We gets out there and he take a point, but you still won the match.
Well, we're gonna interview John Deagle on next Friday. Do you remember mine and John Deagle's exchange in the stands there, Scotty?
Not too much, no.
Now I'll let you know. I'll let you in on the inside secret. So he's up in the stands, and this is my second year coaching or whatever, right? So I'm like 23 years old. I'm young, so he's talking to me like I'm a young kid, right? He's like, and Scotty was a club kid. And he's like, how do you guys let that happen? How do you guys let him lose a point? Blah, 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 yelling at me in the stands. And I was like, why are you worried about my guy that made it to the finals? Why don't you worry about your guys that lost in the semifinals? And that shut him down. But John, just so people know, John's such a good guy and he has such a big heart that we argued like that. And then I guess my mom must have came to watch a little or whatever because it was at Pace then. And my mom sees me walking around. She goes, I just saw John, and he thinks you're mad at him, and he wants to talk to you. He's sorry. I'm like, this guy is crazy. Like, that big monster. Everybody thinks John's such a big monster, but he's such a softie. But
my biggest memory of John Deagle in high school wrestling,
I think I remember
during the season, not at an outside event, was my freshman year.
Crossover!
No, that wasn't it. It was my freshman year. I was wrestling Hector Santana from Pauling. And John came to watch the match, whatever. And that kid was pretty good. I think he won sectionals that year. And it was like the second or third period, whatever it was. It doesn't matter. I'm on bottom. He's on top. And John, was screaming as loud as he could, get up. Nobody else in the stands was making a noise. It was just him screaming on the top of his lungs.
It was at Greeley. It was at Greeley. It was in the center mat. It was Greeley duels.
Yeah. He's changed a lot from then. He doesn't really do that anymore.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Cool. Everybody likes the pet. No, that's got you guys.
That was
we could talk about tomorrow, but with Greg. But my sophomore year in the section finals, he did a similar thing. He was screaming in the stands, and I looked at him instead of my coach, and it caused a bit of a ruckus. And but I think because technically Scotty, that I'm a club coach and a high school coach, right? I try and that's why I think John is grown past this too. I try my hardest not to coach club guys when their high school coach is coaching them, because there's too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes, right? If I'm screaming something and their coach is screaming something, it's just, you don't do it.
Yeah, but realistically, like when you're wrestling, like how often are you, actually listening to somebody screaming in the stands? Like,
no, but you remember the story, so obviously.
well, yeah, I remember.
The only one screaming.
But it was like, an obvious thing, like get up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, we could talk about a lot of the John stuff. I think one point I want to get across, and then we could start wrapping up and just stay down and talk too. But one thing, and we'll talk a little bit maybe about your state tournament too. But one thing I want to talk about is how the Greeley wrestling family is like such a tight knit group, right? Like me and Scotty don't talk every day. We don't talk every month, right? But whenever we talk, it's back to normal. It's not like awkward.
100%.
It's not weird. And I think Scotty is the perfect example of that because he's our first guy. So if our first guy is still kind of in communication with us, we were talking about the match this year, but his work schedule didn't work out. I could look through at some of our texts. We have some funny texts between each other. And it's interesting that like, a guy like Scotty was almost 7, 8 years ago now,
Reggie Williams.
Izzy and Aaron and those guys that graduated, they'll still be around for 10 years because that's the type of family we got here. And I think that's something that should be pointed out.
100%. Like I think if I had the same coaching staff, like when I went to college, I definitely would have wrestled through my entire college experience. And I mean, I don't really know how it is now with you guys. I think it was a little different when I was wrestling between, like the kids and the coaches, because, Anthony was only a couple,
5 years.
we were like almost not the same age, but very close. It was like DeBellis and Marino were like the parents, and Anthony and Danny were like the big brothers. You know what I mean?
It's still, I don't know. It's a little different, but I'm still very fiery and I could be a little bit emotional and not emotional sissy way, but like, like.
No, but the age difference was a lot closer than it is now.
It's definitely different. I definitely matured as a coach, and I think I'm probably a better coach for it now than I was for you. The one thing that I would say that's the same with you and with them is that my passion for the sport and my how much I care about the kids. I care about the kids now just as much, differently because Scotty was our original and there's a different connection there. But, it's for the best, whatever. I don't know if Scotty remembers this, but there was a time when you were cutting a lot of weight, I guess, and you needed to make weight in the morning. Yeah, but you needed to make weight in the morning for something. And
that was the first day I made 195 my senior year. I was like 8 pounds overweight that morning.
Was that at Greeley or did we meet at the club?
No, we met at the club at like
5
o'clock in the morning.
What time was it?
Like 5 o'clock in the morning, yeah.
Yeah, we worked out and you got his weight down. And, would I do that for Michael Machado right now? Yes. So things haven't really changed in that regard, right? But like, I'm definitely a little bit more, for lack of a better word, PG, right? Like I'm more of an adult. I'm not a 23-year-old. I think that's definitely something. I mean, I think I was pretty mature for a 23-year-old back then too. I tried pretty hard, but we grow. Coach DeBellis is different than he was 10 years ago. Coach Marino was different. And I would like to think all of us are better than we were 10 years ago. And I'd like to think in 10 years I'll be better than I am right now. So that's the game plan at least. Last thing, and then we'll wrap it up, Scotty, and we'll just talk unless Coach Marino and Coach DeBellis have other things to talk about, but we could just talk off air too. Do you remember, for me, Aaron winning a state title was really cool. Jacob Ferrer making a state final was really fun. But some of my fondest memories up in Albany was that first trip. Because there's nothing really matches the first time. You know what I mean? Like, so it was really fun being with Marino and DeBellis and Danny and Scotty and, getting up in the morning, going to work out with him and, just being together, getting dinner, being around his dad. Like, I think that was a special weekend, a special trip. Do you have any fond memories from that trip, Scotty, or anything, you want to add about your trip up to States?
Well, like I mentioned before, that match with Levi Ashley will stay with me forever.
Yeah,
that was just a battle. That match.
It was a great match.
That was the quarterfinals.
Yeah, that was the quarterfinals.
He ended up forfeiting to Grella. No, he forfeiting to somebody from Beacon the next year in the semifinals because he had mono.
Oh, that might have been Grella then. the next
I
year.
don't know if
Yeah.
Grella or
Yeah, Grella wrestled 195.
That was Grella because Grella beat Brock the next year in the section finals.
Yeah,
So,
but that was definitely, you know, my fondest memory of the state tournament. You know,
I mean, it was cool. I mean, you got to think about it. Like for Scotty, it was a new experience. For us, it was a new experience. Like it was almost like we were a kid in a candy shop. Like it was like, this is cool. Like, you know, the opening ceremony, all these things. Now when we go up there, we've been up there so many times. It's like, all right, what time does wrestling start? I'll get there a half hour before. You know, but things are still the same, right? Like it's crazy how it's so different, but it's the same. Like I made sure I was there in the morning to warm up with Scotty, right? With Jacob and Aaron, I made sure I was there to warm up in the morning with them, and we were the first guys there, and that's just how we always been operating. It was just a little bit maybe different excitement being the first time. Coach Marino, do you remember that trip a little bit? Was it a good time for you too?
I do. It was a great time. I mean, the night out with you know, the dinner with his dad, and what I liked about those trips are people came up. You know, like it wasn't just us there with him. Teammates came to support him and get up there, and it's still nice to see that they're doing that. You know, there are some kids that still make the trips and they've been removed from the program for a while, like John Russo goes and he was at States. You know, drove down from Oswego to get to Albany. You know, and when Scott was wrestling at Pace and the finals and those matches that he was in for sectionals, the youth and the kids coming to support. And that's kind of when it all started. And it's a big family and it's great to see it. And it's, you know, even getting back, like you said, you weren't coaching yet, and your dad would still be there. You'd see the leather jacket and the coffee cup in the stands, and he's talking to the other guys about wrestling because you know there's those people. There's the old timers who go to the basketball games and check out the big matchups. The wrestling fans that go, and the football, and they go to these games, and you know there's just a crowd. They love the high school sports, and you know that family was brought around by the time when Scott was there, because after you graduated and Greg and Burke and those guys, there was a lull, and then you know then it came back, and Scott was our first, like I said, our first showstopper. We went to matches, and there were times in which we were at one Cornwall duel, and I don't think we scored a single takedown or an escape. Scott won his match, you know, and we were like, okay, yep, we're not just going to be pushed around. And it started there, and other coaches noticed, and, you know, they would like juggle their weight classes around him, you know, at times. And we're like, come on, we're losing like 80 to nothing. And you're sending a different kid out.
And that's the opposite of what we would do.
We've never done it.
Never.
Yeah.
We would never
put our guy out against their best guy.
Always. We would risk the dual meet to put our guy out against their good guy because it's about the process. That to me, that's not even a question. But I just wanted to add too. Think about this, right? And then we could wrap up, or Coach Sabellis could wrap up with something too. I'll kind of nail both of these, I guess, on this. But we had a rebuilding year. This was probably my second wins and losses. I know Coach Bell said, considering the returners we had, and they're great kids, but they didn't have much experience. Considering the returners we had a good year, right? But on paper, this was my second worst year as a coach. My first worst year was Scotty's sophomore year, my first year in the program. Junior year, we didn't do grand sectionals, but we were like 18-5 dual meets. We were good. And then the next year, we were 5th in section. Then we were top 10 in the state twice with Aaron and Matt and those guys. But it always starts somewhere, right? It started with Scotty. Scotty started that that combustion. Is that the right word? I don't know. That explosion, right? Where Scotty put us on the map. You know, we talked about like Aaron and Jacob and them kept us on the map. Now we got a page in the book that it's not going away. Scotty put us on the map, which started the Brocks, right? Scotty had a lot to do with the Brocks. A Brock had a lot to do with a Jacob Ferreira. A Jacob Ferreira has a lot to do with an Aaron Walker and a Matt Schreiber, you know, and a Matt Schreiber has a lot to do with an Isabella Garcia. And we might be in a lull right now, but it's coming back. And if everything's right, when I think about coaching, I'm getting better, and Coach Bellis and Coach Marino, everybody involved is getting more mature and getting better. The next round of success is going to be even higher. Thanks for the guys like Scotty that started this thing off. If he didn't start it off and buy in, like, you know, we talked about with Bing Bing, this never would have happened. None of this. Aaron Walk, none of that would exist. You know, that's important, and people need to understand that. So, D, you got any words for this man here?
How was it being a teammate of Bing Bing?
Love Bing Bing. Bing Bing's the best.
How can you not? Coach Marino, you got something for this man?
I just want to thank him. He's been a great kid. For the times we've been out fishing, like stuff like that, that's off the mat, and just goes to show you, what type of man he is, what type of man his father is. Just good people. And if you're out in Montauk and you want to go fishing, you contact the Wee Jack. The Wee Jack out of the West
Nice
Lake
little
Marina.
plug, Marina.
We got to come back.
Your dad is the man. I don't know why I didn't mention that. Your dad,
Go there.
stick the Shrivers and all them. He was there. He was a great, to be good in the sport. Your dad or somebody's got to support you. And his dad was super supportive. Did an unbelievable job. And just to touch on that fishing trip, Coach Marino, because me and you drove back together. I remember I was flopped. I felt like I was like,
yeah.
They find the fish. They find the
look
fish.
at those fish. Jeez Louise. Look at the fish and look at those guns on you.
I remember Anthony almost, had a little seasickness on that.
But see, these are the relationships.
lot.
Do you remember what happened though? I was turning green and I didn't throw up. And Scotty was sitting right next to me and hoping I vomited. He's like, You're gonna throw up. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's like, throw up. Like, get away from me. Why are you near me right now? But like, I could see Jacob saying the same thing to me. I could say, maybe not Izzy, but like we have these same relationships where it's cool, man. Wrestling brings people close. And Scotty, you better get your butt back to practice a little more.
I'll try, but my work schedule is crazy.
We'll come to a tournament on a Saturday. No excuses.
What? I work Saturdays in the winter too.
Well, take a day off. Come on, get it together. Aren't you the boss?
Scotty did modify our youth with us for 2 or 3 years.
That
He
was
loved
rough.
it. He used to come and smell like
You're the man. But listen, anybody have Scott? You have any words to wrap up on? I'll stop recording, but we'll stay on.
I have one question. It's pretty unrelated to wrestling. But is the 3-point competition, does that still happen?
Yes.
Yeah, I've never lost.
Yeah, I won my senior year. And if
Yes, you did.
that's one of my most memorable things in high school.
God.
Too,
Actually,
I am the worst basketball player
you
ever.
screamed like you won the Olympics, and I was so annoyed.
And I beat Marino in a 3-point competition.
Scotty, do you remember what you screamed? Do you remember what you screamed?
I don't remember what I screamed, but I remember running into the other gyms and screaming at them.
Yeah.
No. He said, "Get some, get some."
Do you know, Sky, don't tell anybody, though, because there's a running joke going on the team this year. I've been saying it to all the kids. They always ask who won the 3-point contest, and as far as they know, and even though they know it's not true, I think, I've told them I've never lost or missed a 3-pointer in my life. So that's where we're at right
Definitely know that's not true.
now.
Scotty, thank you so much. It was great.
Out here.
You guys.
Sky, you're the man. I'm going to stop recording. Greeley legend, the man. Thanks, Scotty.